welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. A little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
Early on a Saturday morning, getting set for UFC Charlotte. If you're coming on, come on. I mean, listen, this was a city that hosted a couple of Ultimate Fighter tournaments back in the 90s, 94 and 95. And now it's set to host Yeon Almeida, who's taking on one Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, people see the first fight that's on the card. Now they get to see that main event between Rozenstruik and Almeida. But when you look at this one in total, I mean, a big time fight at heavyweight. The co-main event is pretty darn good. We're gonna throw back to the ode of the fight of the night screen, as you know, with Fight Night Picks ? Kicks. But I want to shout it out over there in the chat. Raul G's hanging out. Jay Gregg is saying Jesse Jess for the win. Sports Life's hanging out. Morphitrix, Abe Froman's son.
How's it going, everybody?
As well. And yeah, I mean, obviously a big story when we come into Kicks is we get to talk about what happened during the week. We get to talk about the weigh-ins, any differences in any of the picks. And boy, oh boy. I mean, Pete Rodriguez was thrown under the bus. Natan Levy called him Fat Pete, like he's Fat Tyler, who recently retired TJ Dillashaw. But yeah, Fat Pete. Tough go there, bud. So that fight's off. Levy versus Pete Rodriguez. Rodriguez was looking to compete in his first fight at 155 pounds, but he'll have to wait a little bit longer. We ultimately had Bryan Battle, who missed weight. Dana Rodriguez missed weight the first time, then he made weight successfully the second time out. We have a catchweight fight that nobody was going to be knew was going to be a catchweight fight between Cody Stamann and Douglas Silva de Andrade. So a lot of stuff to go through. Jay Gregg saying Rodriguez fight is off, bruh. It's not off, bruh. It's still on. So Ian Gary's still taking on Daniel Rodriguez. That fight's still on. Don't spread.
I think you meant Pete.
Oh, Pete Rodriguez. Oh, yeah.
You don't gotta go after people so
Nah, Fat Pete's off. Fat Pete's off. So, Matt, when we look at this card in total, we're all the way down to 11 fights. It's a kick right in the nuts to all the work that
it's still a really good card,
does.
though, and that's the thing. I know there's only 11 fights on it, but, like, I'm probably more excited for the co-main event than I am the main event, and there's a ton of other great fights on this card. You've got Matt Brown fighting. You've got Tim Means fighting. What?
Well, I mean, let's throw it on over,
it's
too.
Just, like, there's a lot of name value that might not be recognized by people who just recently started MMA, right? Like, if you just started watching... Are there people who started watching UFC because of The Ultimate Fighter anymore? Maybe that's not something that happens very much, but if you are a new fan of the sport, you might not realize just how important guys like Matt Brown are to the UFC, but hopefully this fight against Court McGee does kind of do both guys justice, because this is a fight that does remind me a lot of Ed Herman versus Zach Cummins, right? We're not trying to feed kind of the old guy to the young guy, but we're going to get two old guys who are well past their prime against each other. It's the same thing, Carlos Condit and Matt Brown. Like, there's been a lot of these fights. I like it when legends fight legends, and they don't just have to go in there and kind of get destroyed by these young fighters. So I'm really excited for this fight. Hopefully we just get an entertaining scrap.
Take the man's point. But yeah, no, Matt Brown, Court McGee is one of those fights between a couple of legends. I mean, if you look at it for Court McGee, 10-10 in the UFC. Matt Brown has the positive line, but it's not so much so. I mean,
23-19 is a wild record.
Yeah, you look at Matt Brown's record overall, and then look at Michael Johnson, who's coming up next weekend. Like 4 fights above 500 at 22 and 18. So some rough ones right there. We also have a look, Matt, and we touched on it. I mean, Tim Means taking on Alex Morono. Now, obviously, those weigh-ins on this, they're not adjusted, but when you look at our 1080 by 1080 squares in the regular view, that will have those adjusted weigh-ins. But when you look at this fight, Matt, Alex Morono taking on Tim Means, I know we're really excited about it because for Alex Morono's last time out, super short notice, that's why you see that 179.5. It was 180-pound catch weight against Santiago Ponzinibbio. cruised through the first 2 rounds.
yeah, looked great.
Looked like he was on his way. He could have even finished Santiago Ponzinibbio. But in the 3rd round, he was the nail to the hammer. And for Tim Means, never a dull fight. But Tim Means isn't one of those guys necessarily known for just picking up giant bonuses. So I see it in the comment section. Corey McGregor. Brown beat Diego. Diego beat McGee. Corey McGregor, I saw you comment that one earlier on today. MMA math, buds. MMA math doesn't always work. But they both did train with Damian Anderson, the Lima brothers. And Douglas Lima won last night at Bellator. So listen, Damian Anderson, probably won't see him in another Creed movie. Probably won't see him there.
What a handoff. For Alex Bruno, it is weird because it always seems like his next fight's the one that's going to break him through, right? Because he's been right there, close to the rankings so many times. He's had a lot of big opportunities. Fought Cowboy Cerrone, fought Santiago Ponzinibbio. Like, these are big names in the welterweight division. And not that Tim Means is going to really get him another shot at the rankings, but Tim Means is another pretty big name for being an unranked fighter. He is a guy who is past his prime, but he's still going to make it a very competitive fight. So I think this one's going to result in a really back and forth type of fight.
Malone Hart hits up the giant super chat. Keep
Thank
up
you,
the
Malone.
good work, gentlemen. Thank you very much, Malone Hart, for that super chat. If anybody wants to hit up the super chat, if you so feel inclined, go for it. If you want to toss a like, that is certainly appreciated. But the MVP goes to Malone Hart.
Thank you,
to
Malone.
show off. All right, Matt. So obviously we're down a few fights. People are joining in as we move on through. And it's one of those cards that's going to catch a lot of interest. I've seen a lot of people this week saying that they're going to either their first event live or they're going there live. So pretty cool for North Carolina to have a card like this.
So Tim Duncan was in San Antonio, right? We never thought it would happen. I thought he was...
Michael Jordan does not go to this.
No. Does Kemba Walker go to it? Does LaMelo maybe? No, I'm going to say LaMelo Ball will be in attendance.
Nah, you'll get some famous people that'll get
Well, there's
like
no basketball
small...
today, so I don't think there's going to be NBA players like going to the games. That's the only reason why I say I think we'll get an NBA player there.
Maybe like PJ Washington sighting.
I think Terry Rozier could be there.
Nah.
I love Terry Rozier.
All right, Matt, we start the card off with one Jessica Rose Clark. She's taking on Tainara Lisboa. And when you look at this fight, Matt, for Lisboa, I kind of touched on it at the start of the week. I mean, she's 7-2, or sorry, she's 5-2, 7 total fights, and the combined opponent record was
salty.
3-6.
Yeah.
It wasn't good at all. Now, when you watch the Lisboa fights, you can see why the UFC signed her. I mean, in the fights that she's winning, not the fight that she had against Norma Dumont, who's in the UFC, and the other fight that she lost against, it was Santos, who's 2-1. In that one, you can see, okay, her opponent now 6-1, pretty darn good fighter. But when you look at this one, I see people kind of split on this. For people to say Tainara Lisboa to win by submission, guys, this is a 2-time Muay Thai world champ. Yeah, she's got submission wins over the worst competition you've ever seen. So to go out there and say Lisboa is going to beat Jessica Rose Clark by submission, I think is completely ridiculous, considering Yulia Stoliarenko, the armbar queen, submitted Jessica Rose Clark. Stephanie Egger, the ADCC champ, submitted Jessica Rose Clark. Tainara Lisboa is nowhere near the jiu-jitsu practitioner that Jessica Rose Clark is.
She isn't, but I still think she could have some success just based on I don't think Jessica Rose Clark is the greatest grappler in the top position because she's not active. And that's something that has really just plagued her throughout a lot of her career. Remember the Paige Van Zandt fight? It was terrible. I don't recommend you go back and watch it, but it kind of showed off that Jessica Rose Clark at her best, when she is able to get her boxing combinations going, with her wrestling, it is good. But the wrestling isn't the most offensively oriented after her grappling kind of kicks in after the initial takedown goes. So I could see Jessica Rose Clark getting herself stuck in a bad position. That's all I'm saying. So for Lisboa, I think I agree with everything you said. Is her level of competition poor? Yes, it is. But she was able to demonstrate a very high level of skills on the regional scene. And I feel like I say this every single time we predict one of these Jessica Rose Clark fights. I end up picking her. I end up getting it wrong. So I have her in this fight. I will let everybody know that. So if you want to pick against me, do it right now. But I do have Jessica Rose Clark because, again, I do think the wrestling is going to be able to bank her enough rounds to win this fight.
Yeah, I mean, when you do watch both of these women wrestle, for Tainara Lisboa, it's a lot of upper body, and then to try and trip when it's in the clinch, it takes her quite a while to get some of the takedowns. For Jessica Rose Clark, it's pretty well the same thing. You might see more double leg, single leg out of somebody like Clark and CMMA or Combat Sports Academy. But when you do consider 59% of the fans going with Clark to get the win over at Fight Night Picks, the total odds on this one, I think they've actually flipped. I'm pretty sure Lisboa was the underdog when we made the video. It's loading on Best Fight Odds. It's loading. It makes for great viewing. But yeah, I mean, Lisboa, if you can kind of average them, is about a -120 in this one. So I do have Tainara Lisboa. I had her as a surprise at the start of the week. I'm sure she was an underdog when we did it. I actually wrote down the odds. Clark was a minus 155. Lisboa was plus 135. Now Lisboa is a minus 120. So apparently I have a favorite who's beaten nobody. Bub Collins saying,
Thank you, Bub.
Good fellas. Hitting up that super chat. I'll knock you the virtual fist bump. I have Lisboa because I think the striking can flow a little bit better. As I said at the start of the week, with Jessica Rose Clark, in the fights that she's had against Penny Kanzad, against one Jessica I know you like Jessica I fights, but what did she struggle against? The 1-2s. Now, Jessica Rose Clark is really good at throwing her own 1-2 in boxing combinations, but
really good might be a stretch.
She holds her hands apart, she eats jabs, and she moves her head on the outside, but like she moves into some of these.
She's not David Benavidez by any means.
No, so for me, I'm gonna go with Tainara Lisboa, but I think we differ on this one.
Yeah, I've got Rose Clark, but
All
pick
right.
against me, guys. Just do it. I'm telling you right now.
Oh, that was the best one. Last week, somebody came at me for getting Devin Clark and Kenny Nzechukwu wrong when I took 2 minutes to say I'm really bad at picking these fights. Way to come after me on
just
Twitter.
take the L every now and then. You really just...
I just don't understand it. All right, Matt. So
But it's fine, you know? We get stuff wrong.
Crashmore's coming out. Bryan battle.
Okay, I have something I want to talk to you about on this fight. I
Yeah.
guess we can keep this up. For Bryan battle, is this kind of the end of the road at welterweight? And I mean this more if you
After
just go
2 fights?
based on the last performance and this one and looking how poor he looked on the scales. Like if Gabe Green goes in there and finishes Bryan battle, I don't think we're going to get a third performance at 170, do you?
No, I mean, if you look at it for battle, he knocks out Takashi Sato in under a minute. Sato is going to be taking a fight next weekend, so look forward to that one. And then battle comes out against Fakhretdinov, who we know is good, but at the same time, not the greatest level of guys, and, in the UFC, man. But Bryan Battle's last time out got completely just held down and controlled, and he couldn't work that jiu-jitsu off the back like Mansour Barnaoui
He looked
yesterday.
awful on the scales, too.
Yeah, so Bryan Battle, 173. You don't like to see that. Battle looked in better shape. I don't know about that one. But when you look at this one, I mean, for Bryan Battle to take on Gabe Green, we talked about kind of the interviews and what these guys were kind of thinking about going into this fight that they had done with JHK and some others out there on YouTube. Gabe Green, you look over on his Instagram, it's all strength and conditioning. And yeah, he's working in, obviously, his MMA, but he's definitely gained and gotten a lot bigger. So if you look at a guy like Gabe Green, he does that and he makes the weight. Super chat from Malone Hart. Y'all do great work. Don't worry about the haters. People can be kind of crappy. Oh, you bet, because there's a record for all of our picks, but not for yours out there. But when you look at this one, Matt, I mean, for me with Gabe Green, it's all the action to try and close the distance. He leaves himself out there in some of his stance switches. That can cause him some issues. For me, I like Gabe Green with the complete package of his skill set against a guy like Bryan Battle, but some people might prefer Battle on the outside, although we've seen Gabe Green fight Johan Lines recently, get worked with that right hand.
Thing is, though,
but also Phil Rowe.
If Bryan Battle is on the outside, though, it's just going to make him more susceptible to the big shot from Gabe Green. And if Bryan Battle had a really bad weight cut, which we all saw the video and the pictures, and we know how he missed weight, I really worry about Bryan Battle's just durability at 170, because Fakhretdinov was able to clip him and hurt him at multiple occasions.
Yeah, it was a weird,
fight.
it wasn't the fastest right hand that hit him.
No, and that's why I just speak to Bryan Battle. Like, at 185, he might be a little bit too small, but at 170, it just might not be the play for him, because he does make a ridiculous weight cut to get down to this weight class. I know he looked good against Sato, who is still fighting in the UFC, but he's not the best fighter in the world. Let's just say it. Call it what it is. And Gabe Green's someone who is going to test you. He might get hit by a couple big shots, but guess what? He's going to land his own big shots too, and that's why I also have Gabe Green in this one.
Marcus Mustard saying, good morning, 11 fights from Charlotte. Yes, 11 fights from Charlotte. And Mactown, yeah, I mean, just found out it was in Charlotte. That's 2 hours from me, brother. Matt, all right, well, so both of us in this one with gifted Gabe. Green at Fight Night Picks for the total Instagram votes on this one. 65% with Bryan Battle. Bryan Battle is the only hometown fighter fighting out of Charlotte on this card, so obviously unfortunate that he missed the weight. Then we move into a fight, Matt, that most people will probably grab a break. We have Yeon Kim, who's lost many fights in a row, taking on Mandy Bohm. You got to pronounce that O-umlaut. And she's lost 2 in the UFC to Ariane Lipski. And Lipski being the last one, obviously it was Mandy Bohm and illness that forced her out of her last scheduled fight with Yeon Kim. The UFC debut, Lipski, then Victoria Leonardo. Leonardo fighting next weekend against Natalia Silva. And just to let you know, I'm picking Natalia Silva in that fight. But when I look at this one, Matt, Mandy Bohm, we know the striking. We know what it can be, what we saw over with TKO and some other enterprises. But when you look at somebody like Mandy Bohm, we just haven't seen that complete skill set. Now, as I said at the start of the week, Throw that sleeve up there.
A pale arm.
And put it up to the top. Now, I got a burn this week, but my arm didn't.
Not in the shoulder.
No, I was wearing a long sleeve. But when you look at this one, Mandy Bohm training with...
You burned your hands then? I'm so confused.
No, training with Dewey Cooper in Vegas ahead of this one. So when I look at this fight, Matt, I like Yeon Kim for the activity. I think that Kim can keep it really busy. But if she eats a couple of big shots and it backs her off, that could see Mandy Bohm coming back into the fight. So chalk this one up to pop and popcorn and move on with your day.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting like Rory McDonald, Douglas Lima too. I don't think this is going to be a great fight by any means. I agree with you though. I do like Yeon Kim's movement and output on the outside. I think those are enough things that can bank her rounds in this fight. I'd be surprised if we saw a finish either way, if I'm being honest, because neither fighter has that kind of hellacious power to go out there and get a knockout. I have Kim, again, I like the movement on the outside, but the loser of this, it's over. Like, this is CM Punk versus Jeff Hardy in the steel cage. Unfortunately, my dad spoiled the results to me the night before because Jeff Hardy unfortunately failed a drug test in the WWE. But that's what this fight is the equivalent of. Jeff Hardy, you
Jeff
son
Hardy's
of a gun.
in the PFL?
No, but Jeff Hardy broke a young Matthew Allen's heart.
You still had Matt Hardy in there. Matt, when we get ready for this one, Yeon Kim's about a 2-1 favorite, which is obviously scary.
Of course it is.
She's lost 4 fights in a row. 66% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going Yeon Kim. Now we get into a very interesting fight. And Matt, I know I say it every time, so I'll say it today. My guy, Douglas Silva de Andrade, take on Cody Stamann. Now, why do I say this is a really interesting fight? Well, because yesterday I was getting just finished with the graphics for next weekend's fight card, that Dern Hill card. And spoiler alert, or I guess a preview alert, we're going to do a live show on Monday night for Dern versus Hill. Full card breakdown. It's not going to be near 2 hours. It's going to be a half hour to 45 minutes. The same graphics, the same people that you know and love, but it's going to be a live show. So something new from Fight Night Picks just for that one because the card is kind of blah. But when you look at this fight in general, I was looking at Gilbert Urbina and I thought, where's he training? Because his last fight against Bryan Battle, he was training at the BMF ranch. So I'm going on the socials, I'm looking it up, and Bryan Battle is training out of the Fight Capital gym with Coach John Ballgame. And I thought, okay, I'm going to click on this guy's Instagram. So I click on it and I get down and dirty. John Ballgame, a guy I've never heard of, is training Douglas Silva de Andrade for this fight. Douglas didn't train for this fight in Brazil. He's been in Vegas. So then I go down and I click on the Instagram of a guy that Douglas is training with. And his name is Alessandro Almeida, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu national IBJJF champ. And Alessandro's last post on Instagram says, and I quote, my brother I'm going to quote it exactly. My brother at D.Silva MMA is ready for tomorrow night. His opponent couldn't make weight. Now the fight is on a catch weight at 140 pounds. The goal is the same, the victory. OSS. So I don't know why this one's a catch weight. Obviously, that's what Douglas Silva de Andrade's teammate is saying out of Vegas. But I had this to say. Both guys were shred city on the scales to get ready for this one. Douglas Silva de Andrade, sometimes he can struggle against the wrestling, especially if it's somebody that can mix their power punching with their wrestling. But when you look at a matchup like this, I see it over there. Todd Drury is saying Andrade's got that dog in him. Kicks good
Certainly
saying
does.
Andrade, and more of a trick saying people are sleeping on D. Silva. My trouble is, I know I am. I'm a fan of Douglas Silva de Andrade, so I have to kind of keep that at bay. But I love the fight, Matt, and I know we split on this pick.
It is a really fun fight. It's a real do or die for Cody Stamann. If it's one of those questions where it's a very first take sports radio question. Whose legacy does this affect more? Not that this really affects either guy's legacy, but if Stamann loses this, you kind of won't ever really see him at the spot of the division that he once occupied, right? And not that Stamann was ever a title threat, but he was one of those guys who was a bit of a specialist, but he would offer a very difficult fight to anybody in the top 15 because he is sound defensively on the feet and he has really good wrestling, so he's going to be able to go in there and chain a lot of things together and look really good. But Stamann hasn't necessarily progressed further than just being that really good wrestler, with slightly increasing hands.
Usually, guys that have gone to Extreme Couture, they just continue to get better and better and better.
But the thing is, guys who go there aren't normally the thing that they make. Whereas Cody Stamann is kind of what they end up making, right? What do you go to Extreme Couture for? You're wrestling and you're boxing. What has Cody Stamann always been good at? His wrestling and his boxing. So while I do agree with you, I think it has just been more of a refinement of his own skills.
Yeah, that's
and not
like
adding...
Sergey Spivak
My point is, not adding more tools to his toolbox. He's just refining the ones that he already already has. So for Stamann, I do have him in this fight. I do think the wrestling's going to be good enough, but you really gotta expect a little bit more out of Stamann. You know, like, I do expect him to look good in this fight and hopefully try to get back, because if he loses to Andrade, and I have a ton of respect for Andrade, you guys have said it, he has that dog in him. A fight might look terrible for him, and he might look like he's down and out, but he's always going to be in it. I just think the wrestling from Stamann's going to be a little bit too much for him.
Crazy line on it. Stamann opened a -175. He was a -130. The fight changed a bit, and now he's a -160. So Cody Stamann is favored in this one. About 58% on our Instagram story at Fight Name Picks have Stamann to get the win. Split on the pick. I'm going with Douglas Silva de Andrade. You're going with Cody Stamann. And then we move on, Matt. Karl Williams is taking on Chase Sherman. There's a couple of heavyweight fights on this card. One is ranked in the main event. One is not. Karl Williams taking on Chase Sherman. So for Chase Sherman and Karl Williams, this fight was originally due for UFC 287. It was supposed to be Chris Barnett versus Chase Sherman. Barnett is out on a few days' notice. Williams takes the fight. He talked a lot about his strength and conditioning, about adding muscle mass and bone density with the Performance Institute. He's gone up from 205. He is a heavyweight now. And when you look at Karl Williams getting ready for a matchup like this, his strength and Chase Sherman's strength, they're kind of polar opposites. I mean, you'll see Karl Williams strike a little bit, but it's in that Luis Smolka zone, like when Jonathan Almeida decides to strike against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. You're going to be nervous while it happens. And for Chase Sherman, he's not necessarily a one-punch knockout guy. He's an accumulation boxer. He's the type of guy that's going to throw in combination, mix in some leg kicks when he's at the peak of his powers. And I know he's only been 4-10 in the UFC. But when I look at this one, Prince Vegeta's son, Karl Williams looks little. Sherman, turn the corner. We're going to find if he can Bob Seger and turn the page on this one. But for me, Matt, I have Karl Williams with his wrestling advantage. I assume.
Chase Sherman can make a fight against a pure striker really entertaining. But even then, you don't think he's going to win it all the time. Like, it really does require a lot of accumulation from the leg kicks and the boxing combinations for him to go out there and get those kind of wins. The fact that Karl Williams can go out there and just use his wrestling for the majority of this fight, I do think that's going to be able to carry him to a win. But, like you said, Karl Williams' striking is like the closer Jordan Romano for the Blue Jays. You're nervous every time that guy is on the mound, and you're nervous every time Williams is
If he's pitching in Toronto, your wife is going to walk out, watch the TV, watch the walkout experience, because he walks out the Dub Tsunami, a band that I saw, or group, I guess, that I saw, at the UNB Student Union building.
What does any of this have to do with this?
Wild. But when you look at this one, Matt, I mean, for me, I do have Karl Williams with that wrestling advantage. He was a big favorite when we made the video. He's still minus 400 in the matchup. If you have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one, 81% going with Karl Williams. So yeah, for me, I'm going Williams. You're going Williams. We'll move forward into our next matchup. And this is where those kind of underground king fight of the night start to come into play. You have Matt Brown taking on Court McGee. And when you do look at this matchup, Matt, I mean, for Court McGee, his last time out, he got just mopped by Jeremiah Wells. And Jeremiah Wells is a very interesting fighter. Did he beat Matt Semmelsberger's last time out? It's open to interpretation. It's a win on his record, but he certainly beat Court McGee on that night. And for Matt Brown, his last time out, he was more the nail than the hammer against Bryan Barberena, but he did land some really good shots of his own. He did mix in his wrestling as well. He got caught a couple of times, but Matt, when you do look at this matchup, I mean, this is kind of a clash of styles, because for Court McGee, he's going to pump the jab out there, occasionally throw his right hand, mix in some of his wrestling. You saw that against Ramiz Brahimaj somewhat recently as an example of a big Court McGee wrestling match win. And for Matt Brown out of Immortal Martial Arts, I mean, Mark Coleman's going to be in Charlotte for him.
Charlotte, like Zach, couple of sober kings right here. Like you'd hate to see Court McGee or Matt Brown lose. You know what I mean? At this stage of their career, they're both great guys by all accounts. Like, Court McGee does a ton of work with people who have addictions and whatnot, and he really has used his platform to try to help others, and you always love seeing things like that. And same thing for Matt Brown.
Yeah, that's what I kind of alluded to it, but I didn't outright say it. I said, oh, well, John Anik or Brendan Fitzgerald will talk about their stories this week. Surely they will.
But it's not like a sad story, you know? No. Like, Matt Brown and Court McGee have both been able to turn their lives around for the better. And two fighters that I very much enjoy watching to fight. You always say D. Silva's your guy. I may have picked against Matt Brown in this fight, but guess what? If he knocks out Court McGee, I'm going to cheer. And if Court McGee wins, I'm going to be a little bit sad, but I'll still be happy for Court McGee. My point is, for Matt Brown, I still love watching the guy fight, but he does lack the one thing I think he would still need at this stage of his career to win this fight, and it's the one-punch knockout power. He still has good power, he still has great volume, the combinations are good, but he does need 2, 3, 4, 5 shots to really go out there and put a guy away, and Court McGee His chin isn't what it used to be. Remember the stats? Only one guy had knocked him out. It was Ponzinibbio. No one could even hurt him. McGee can get hurt now, but I still don't think his recovery is so poor to where if Matt Brown hurts him and rocks him, Brown's just going to be able to hit him with a big flurry and get him out of there. And for that reason, I think the consistency of McGee along with his wrestling is good enough to get him the win.
And that's why I think the consistency of Matt Brown, especially tying his strikes together, can win him this fight. Now, 54% at Fight Night Picks going with Matt Brown. Phoenix is throwing it out there saying smash that like button. The people, nice. They continue to tune in. It's an early morning show. You toss us a like, we'd appreciate it. Court McGee's more than a 2-1 favorite, so I'm kind of surprised to see the fan vote where it is at Fight Night Picks on Instagram. Again, I do have Matt Brown to get the win. Kicks good, sprinkling some Brown round 1 knockout. I don't know about that.
Wild.
I don't know about that one. So, Matt, we'll move on and we'll move forward and we'll have a look at Tim Means taking on Alex Morono. Now, did Morono look like death on the scale?
He didn't look great.
I thought he looked like actually pretty bad, which is worrisome when you pick Alex Morono to win this fight. Now, I'm the type that I have to take myself out of my own head because if I overthink it on Saturday, I change the pick and then I look like a turkey and throw all the stuff that I did at the start of the week out the window. So for me, I'm going to stick with Alex Morono. But when I look at a fight like this, Matt, Alex Morono, Taekwondo black belt, BJJ black belt, training at Fortis, training at Gracie Baja Woodlands, and I saw an interview that he did out there this week with, again, JHK. He was training at War Training Center as well. So you're going to get Trevin Giles as a look out of that gym, among others. We also saw Joseph Holmes representing that gym last week. Didn't go well for him. Now for Tim Means, this is a guy at a fit NHB, and why would you go to Jackson Wink when you're hanging out in Albuquerque?
Don't need to.
Screw it. Train out with the Boom Boom, Brenda Means Gonzalez. But Matt, when you look at this one, I mean, Tim Means, you talk about like some of those unorthodox looks that you're going to get on the feet. Tim Means, he's throwing elbows, some things that you might not see in trainings where I'm going with it. So I think this fight's great. Sci-Fi Raiders saying hello. Walid is saying Morono. Kicks Good saying Morono. And Trevor Warner saying, let's go Tim. Let's go, Tim.
And Todd Drury Means is reckless and on a straight line. That really is how he fights. He's not great at moving left to right, but when he is moving downhill with his combinations, he's a difficult fighter to deal with. And you bring up the elbows, he does a really good job at managing the distance between his punches and his elbows, because what do we talk about with a lot of fighters who have long arms? Hey, they're really good at long distance, but what can you do? You can get on the inside, you can make it uncomfortable for them. Tim Means might not have the durability to where he's super comfortable on the inside, but offensively, there's not a ton of fighters who can really match him in some of those positions. I know Mike Perry's all the hotness right now, and Mike Perry probably should have beat Tim Means. Like, that was the one fight where I'm like, this isn't great for Means, right? I know Mike Perry didn't have the best run in the UFC, but he's really heavy-handed. He has surprising power late in fights. I can see him knocking out Means. Means just threw like 400 punches and looked like prime Tim Means, so if we get that version of him, I could definitely see him going out there and getting a win. The difference between a guy like Perry and Morono is Perry's going to load up on those big shots and then not do a ton on the in-between, whereas Alex Morono's the complete opposite. He's not going to load up on his big shots. He's going to throw a high volume. He will mix in his power shots when he really has to. So hopefully, like, I really do think this is going to be fight of the night when it's all said and done. I think we're going to get 15 back and forth minutes. It should be a really entertaining fight. I have Alex Morono by like 5%.
Really?
Like, just barely, because I do think Tim Means possesses a lot of the strengths that can give Alex Morono issues. I think that inside fighting that Tim Means does possess, not that Morono can't fight there, but Morono does like his footwork. He does like working on the outside. So I do think that range can give Tim Means a lot of success.
To me, I like Morono where he circles away. I kind of liken that to Yeon Jonan last weekend when she's taking on Jessica Andrade in the pre-fight. But if you have a look at Fight Night Picks for this one, 76% of the fans going with Alex Morono to get the win. Kadu 34 saying Morono is so crafty. So yeah, that should be an interesting one there. And Trevor Warner really just cutting to the chase. Was over there on Twitter last night. Yikes. So Matt, both of us going with Alex Morono in this matchup. A prime welterweight fight. Getting us ready for Carlos Ulberg taking on Ihor Potieria. I mean, Ihor Potieria, what he did after he beat Shogun Hua, if I could liken it, it's like when Colby Rasmus used to get the double play in the outfield for the Jays and he'd do the for a double, like 2 out, and he'd do that every single time there was 2 out. He'd go like that. But when you look at a guy like Ihor Potieria, he retired a legend. He has that on his record. Like, if everybody forgets, he can remind them. It's like Brian Scalabrine won an NBA championship. It really happened. Ihor Potieria knocked out and retired Shogun Hua. So real things that happen in real life. Now, Potieria is going to be taking on Carlos Ulberg, and I see it over there. Marcus Mustard, Ulberg, dead ahead. Iceberg. Oh, apparently Ulberg's going to be like the iceberg. And Todd Drury, I saw you say earlier you were taking Potieria in the matchup. Kicks Good saying this is not going the distance. And when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, I said at the start of the week, Ihor Potieria, what's his background? He's got that Horting background. Now, that's one part of it for sure, but when you watch a guy like Peteria, big naked hooks, big sidewinder roundhouse that he throws from the southpaw stance. He's not necessarily the most defensive-minded fighter.
No.
He throws out defense for offense, whereas Carlos Ulberg, unless he's tired, he has some defense. And when you watch a guy like Ulberg, he likes to stick that lead hand out there. He likes to mix in his combinations to the body, to the head, and he throws really good kicks, as does Peteria. Peteria has really good kicks. I'd be interested to see if Peteria decides to push Ulberg back, cross the distance, get it up against the cage, and try and work in some of those takedowns. How successful Peteria could be with that. But when I look at a fight, if I just assume this is just a striking matchup, I think Black Jag gets the win. And I think overall, I'm definitely siding with Black Jag here.
I have Ulberg's lost one time in the UFC to a really good fighter. And he was lighting him up for, 6 minutes? Carlos Ulberg isn't some scrub who was just in the UFC because he's friends with Israel Adesanya. I feel like that was sort of the narrative around it when he first made the transition over to the UFC, over to MMA in general, but his skills really do translate. And you said, when he's not tired.
He was 4-0, a guy on a Bachelor show. It was kind of
It was, but we've seen a lot of guys who don't have a ton of experience just be tied to these stars, and then they fizzle out after one fight.
Alex Wilson hitting up the super chat. You guys are legends. I owe you this one from last year. Thank you, Alex Wilson.
Very kind of you. But my point is, for Ulberg, he has shown that his abilities do translate at the highest level, and I could see Peteria going in there and, like you said, crashing the distance, but I gotta be honest, this might be a bit of a hot take. I think we're gonna get a bit of a feeling out process in this fight. I do think both guys are gonna realize just how powerful their opponent is, and I think we will get maybe 2 or 3 minutes before we really see the action start to being pressed.
Well, and you talk about a guy like Carlos Ulberg, strength and conditioning is definitely a base. You see that with him walking around, but Ihor Peteria, as we showed in the video at the start of the week, he's been really working on his strength and conditioning down at Tiger Muay Thai, lifting the weights, getting ready for the fight.
Ulberg's not Blood Diamond.
No, you have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes. 78% going with Ulberg to get the win. Blood Diamond, former opponent Orion Kosi. Lewis is out of the UFC, but Orion's still in, and he fights next weekend. Matt, I'm going with Ulberg, and so are you. And then we get into an interesting matchup. Ian Machado Gary threw a pizza at the door of Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez came in a little heavy, and then he weighed in again within the allotted window, and he made the weight. So D-Rod, first fight in some time, and making the weight. Making the weight his last time out. He lost to Neil Magny. Before that, he controversially won a split decision over the Leech, Li Jingliang. So Matt, when you look at this one, Carlos saying, watch you guys week in and week out. Keep it up.
Thank you,
Carlos. Thanks for tuning in from Australia. We also have Deuce Dimensions. He likes Ian Gary to win. I don't know about that by submission, but when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, we touched on it at the start of the week. Ian Machado Gary's background, judo and boxing. Daniel Rodriguez, the foundation is definitely boxing, though he has that sneaky jiu-jitsu. You saw that in the Tim Means matchup when distance was crashed. Rodriguez was able to get the submission win. Obviously, the Ian Machado Gary fights against Southpaw scare you. The one that he had against Jordan Williams where he kept getting cracked by the left hand until he got his own finish, or until he was able to land his right off the counter. And then his fight against Gabe Green until he was able to land it in the third round. So when you look at a fight like this, we know how good Daniel Rodriguez is when he's flowing, because when he's not, there can be a lot of hurry up and wait to his fight.
Exactly, and that's going to be a really big issue against a guy like Gary, who, yes, he does have those defensive liabilities. We've all seen them by this point. He holds his chin so high up, it's ridiculous. But the offense is kind of also ridiculous. There is a two-headed sword there, and it does come down to when he lands on guys, they can't really put up with it. And the difference is, I can't stand the whole Ian Gary. Don't tell me how good you are at talking and then just tell me other guys' quotes the whole time. Ridiculous. But for Daniel Rodriguez, this is my whole point. If you're the UFC, the UFC likes to build up these prospects, right? And then they kind of have that one big do-or-die fight. Don't give Ian Gary Jeff Neal. Oh. Jeff Neal destroys him. Jeff Neal is probably texting Dana White every second of every day, I'll fight Gary. I'll fight him for free. I will do, Jeff Neal would.
We can do it at the Cheesecake Factory.
We could. He is this man's nightmare because Jeff Neal's so much better. But I do agree. Daniel Rodriguez can make him pay if he is going to be that aggressive version of himself. But even when D-Rod's landing power punches, do you know what is the problem? He's doing it on the back foot a lot. And how most guys land against Ian Gary is they'll move forward, they'll get him uncomfortable against the cage, and then they'll land their own power shots. I'm not saying D-Rod can't win by knockout. I'm just saying the way that he normally lands his big shots isn't necessarily the way that Ian Gary gets cracked by big shots. And that's why I do have Gary in the match.
Thomas McWilliams. Gary coming back quick after that knockdown last fight. Keep up the good work, boys. He did get knocked down in the first round of his last one against Son Kanan. Like Chumbawamba, round 2, round 3, he was able to get the finish. But when you look at a guy like Ian Gary, the pullback without a payback is definitely the issue in his fight game. You can see that. But if he's able to flow with his combinations, if he's able to keep some of that distance, that's where you see Ian Machado Gary have a lot of success. So people are definitely lukewarm, hot, and cold on him. I'd stay away from this one because it does scare me with that pullback and with the fact that Daniel Rodriguez, when he mixes in his jab, he mixes his left either hook to the body or he goes back to the head. He could cause Gary some issues for sure. And we've seen Daniel Rodriguez fight with more of a frenetic pace inside of the UFC's octagon than we have Gary. Gary, I mean, yeah, when he was with Cage Warriors, he could kind of get moving. It wasn't the same level of competition, but with Rodriguez, like his fight against, who am I thinking of here? Dwight Grant, where it was just holy smokes, like that went fast. Or some of the others, we've seen him go out there and get a little bit crazy with it. If you have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total vote, 67% going with Ian Machado Gary. I have Gary in the matchup. Morphatrix, does D-Rod hit the gritty if he wins? I can't picture it. Neither can I. I don't think I
never do that again. Craig. That was the stiffest thing I've ever seen.
I'm sitting.
You couldn't do it if you were standing, and you know it.
Sure, I could.
Craig.
All right.
You look like Mike Gesicki.
Mike Gesicki. I mean, he found a new team this year. Anthony Smith taking on Johnny Walker in the co-main event of the evening.
I love this fight more than I should.
It's funny when people comment on this fight, they're like, Johnny Walker, he's been knocked out so much, and then they look at the knockout stats for Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith's truly been knocked out more, but his career has been much longer.
I feel like it's more TKOs, though.
And at middleweight, too. You got to consider that one. But when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, Johnny Walker found his groove again. He's like the Emperor. And his last 2 fights, 2 big wins, a submission win over Yeon Kutsalaba, the knockout win where, hey, Paul Craig, don't catch that foot because, you're going to have a big hand and then a bunch of backwards hammer fists to knock him out. Paul Craig, moving down to middleweight. Doesn't seem like the play, but that's what he's doing. So you look at a fight like this, Matt, and, I mean, Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, they can both at times come with that big storm in the first round, and I know that might sound silly, but you've seen Anthony Smith go out there and let loose. When you look at a matchup like this, I'd say even though Johnny Walker has been able to implement the jiu-jitsu like he was able to against Kutsalaba recently, I would take Smith as the much better grappler in this
Johnny
fight.
Walker gets on top of him, I think he could TKO him.
Oh, yeah, it would definitely be scared because you'd have Smith playing possum.
Well, I just mean... The thing is, you're right. Anthony Smith is the better grappler on paper. But if Johnny Walker gets on top of him, you know what they don't do in gi jiu-jitsu? Ground and pound with guys who are 6'6". Like, Johnny Walker doesn't need to be great at jiu-jitsu to win this fight. He can just pepper him up with a lot of big shots because Anthony Smith is a great offensive fighter. Defensively, though, he does just kind of have that mold where he shells up, he likes to get up against the cage, and I do understand from a certain position. Like, Andrei Koreshkov got knocked out by Douglas Lima because he was doing the same thing. Douglas Lima likes to get his back up against the cage because it eliminates variables, right? Yes, it might not be a good position for you to be in, but at least you know my opponent's going to be right in front of me. He's not going to move around very much, even though he has the space to do so, so I have a higher likelihood of landing my own shots. The difference is, Anthony Smith, power-wise, does not have the power Douglas Lima does pound for pound, and he does require a very high volume of strikes to get a lot of these knockouts. Now, I don't think Johnny Walker's durable enough to eat a lot of strikes from Anthony Smith, to where if Smith gets him in the clinch and starts landing big elbows, I could see him knock him out like we saw Khalil Roundtree.
No, I mean, for me, you look at the Anthony Smith fight that he had against Ryan Spann, and it was those clipping shots that were able to wobble Spann.
Yeah.
And Spann and Walker, chin for chin, they're at about the same level.
And it's not it's not like they're fighting for the Gaethje Poirier title. They're fighting for, like, the Sun and...
UFC 4 would give their stamina bars like a 4.5, but deep down, you know, if Raul Rosas Jr. can have 4s up there on the bar, then yeah, I mean, what are we doing here?
Talking like the oldest man alive.
You look here at the odds, it is basically a pick'em. We have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total vote on this one, and Matt, 62% going with Johnny Walker. Now, one guy co-hosts a podcast with Michael Bisping, one guy main evented a card here in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada, and does Luis J. Gomez even do the podcast anymore? Is he on Believe You Me? I haven't listened.
You've gone on so many tangents, just say one person's name, and then you're like, what is that guy doing for breakfast tomorrow?
For fun. But when you have a look at this one, Matt, I mean, I do have Johnny Walker with power in those strikes. I hope this one doesn't go too long because that Johnny Walker fight that he had against the PFLs, Thiago Santos. That was a tough one as it went on. There was a lot of tentativeness in Walker's game. But the last two fights, his opponents have definitely brought the fight to him, and that's kind of got them going.
I kind of disagree. If Johnny Walker does start to slow, Anthony Smith isn't. He's going to finish him. Like, that's what I mean. I think this fight's going to be very entertaining from the second it starts till the second it's over. I wouldn't be surprised if it was like knockout, submission, or decision on either part. Honestly, that's how good, but also kind of how bad sometimes these fighters are. I do have Johnny Walker because he is the more explosive guy between the two. I know Anthony Smith is the steadier guy, and normally I like to pick the more steadier of the two, but I don't like the way he does hold his hands up defensively. I think it opens up a lot of knees to the body from Johnny Walker, but you know what would be kind of fun? We haven't had a clinch-heavy offensive fight in a long time, but both these guys are sick in the clinch. They both have great elbows, great knees up the middle. I would be really entertained if we had a really fun kind of close-range fight between two guys you would assume are fighting from very long distances.
AKA Simplex, middleweight Paul Craig is a bad idea. I bet you I can match make for Paul Craig really quick at middleweight. You know who they put him up against? Puna Soriano. I bet you they make that fight. Puna Soriano and Paul Craig. The fans want it. Matt, the main event, Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Jailton Almeida. And people that have watched one Jailton Almeida fight and never watched any of the regional scene fights, which are all of his career pretty well, are going to say, well, remember that time that he threw one kick against Shamil Durkimov and he got countered with the right hand, hit really hard.
What happened for the rest of that fight?
And then he backed off, went for a takedown, and got it moving. I mean, if you didn't watch Jairzinho Rozenstruik Jailton Almeida strike on the regional scene, it's a lot of really wide base, really long shots. He's kind of like Michael Morales, who fights down at 185 in the way that he strikes. Because again, he will throw out defense for offense, but he strikes from a long range with a lot of really powerful shots. And then he's able to shoot in for his takedowns off of that. And we talked about it. I mean, the Almeida to... the Edge comp when it comes to the wrestling. He goes in there for spears, for the double legs. He's really powerful with his takedowns. He locks your legs. He forces you to turn over. And from there, it's a barrage of strikes to open up the rear naked choke. That's Jailton Almeida in a nutshell. But Matt, when you look at this one, I mean, we've got Crazy saying good morning, guys. We've got Kicks Good saying Almeida's got this. And then can't wait to see Walker get taken down over and over in the last fight. I'm really eager to hear who people have in this fight because, I mean, almost 400 tuning in on an early Saturday morning. We got to get those likes up there. You can hit up the super chat if you'd like. And over there in that community tab, 73% going with Almeida. I know we're going to get a large preponderance of commenters who are going to say Rozenstruik. But when you look at a matchup like this, we've actually seen good takedown defense from Jairzinho Rozenstruik against good wrestlers in the UFC.
But that's the problem with Jairzinho Rozenstruik. He's great at defending takedowns, just the separation that comes after them, he's not phenomenal at. He's good at digging the underhooks. We saw that a lot in the Curtis Blades fight. That was a loss where... I don't want to say he gained stock because he did lose pretty much every round of that fight, but he proved he had a skill I didn't think he had. So at least for me, that's a small win in the book of Jairzinho Rozenstruik. But the takedowns he was able to defend in that fight do show a bit of a game plan to where, hey, if he goes out there, defends the early takedowns from Almeida, starts throwing his good hooks to the body, throwing his hooks to the head, he can win a knockout. We know how powerful a guy like Jairzinho is, but I'm going to go back to a point that I really wanted to make at the start of the week, and it's that Jairzinho has proven he can win at the UFC level, and he can win at the ranked level in the UFC. He hasn't proved he can win rounds, though, which is kind of weird. Like, you rarely make it to his level and have all the wins he has without winning a round along the way. But for Rozenstruik, he does really rely a lot on these huge explosions. Now, when he moves forward and throws his hands, he is one of the most devastating punchers in the division, and it's kind of frustrating watching him fight, right? Go back to the Augusto Sakai matchup. Augusto Sakai had his back up against the cage and wasn't doing anything, and him and Jairzinho looked in the mirror for 4 minutes, and then Jairzinho just decided, oh, I can move forward and throw my hands, and when he did, that fight was over in a heartbeat. So Rozenstruik has all of the skills to put together to win this fight. I just don't know if he can be consistent enough with all those skills to actually win this fight.
No, I mean, if Rozenstruik's going to get it done, you saw it in his fight against Chris Daukaus his last time out. One shot from Daukaus, and then Awaken the Beast and Biggie Boy, and he was able to go out there and implement that game plan. And he looked really, really good when he was flowing with his strikes. He was able to land, and every hard shot was able to rock and hurt Daukaus. So when you look at a matchup like this, I know that Almeida is heavily favored in this one, and we both have Jailton Almeida in this one. I saw a lot of clickbaity headlines like, look at all the big weight discrepancy. Jailton Almeida fought Parker Porter, who was at the top of the heavyweight division. You also see Jairzinho Rozenstruik hitting that upper limit at 265 in this one. Rozenstruik weighing in 4 pounds more than his last fight. He was at 261 or 261.5. Almeida, it's only like a 1 pound difference between his last fight. He was 232 and he's 231 for this one. So it'll be an interesting one. VT saying it's big E boys, technicality versus Almeida's tenacity. And boy, is Almeida tenacious for those takedowns. But I'd be eager to see, if Almeida can't get the takedowns and he's forced to strike and he gets tired, then it is all Biggie Boy in this fight. Because we've even seen with Biggie Boy, as fights go on, he's still there, he's still with it, and he is very well schooled in those kickboxing fights. I mean, what was it, 84 fights and 74 wins and 60-some knockouts. So for Rozenstruik, I think it's a really interesting fight, Matt. For Almeida, if he gets the win, he automatically just jumps the queue there at heavyweight. And I know he's a guy that has aspirations on 2 belts, and you can see that from the weigh-ins, but I think
Brandon Vera.
I think it's going to be a fun one. Brandon Vera, 1 championship's own. So, Matt, it is a fun fight. What is the fight? I know we did the fight in the night screen, but what's the fight that you're most looking forward to this week?
I'm really interested in that co-main event. And I know it doesn't have the biggest storyline going with it. Anthony Smith and Johnny Walker, like, the winner and the loser of that fight could probably fight the same guy next. You know? Like, it's kind of weird to put them in that position, but they're probably just going to fight a really hyped up prospect next, or like somebody kind of on the outside of the top 7 or 8. So maybe the implications of this fight aren't going to lead them to a title, but I think it's a fun fight, right? Anthony Smith is always involved in one of those eat one to take one, or to give one kind of fights. And Johnny Walker just makes no sense. He's going to get knocked out sometimes, but he's also going to land some of the craziest strikes you've ever seen. So I think it's a really fun fight.
I think the winner of this fight either fights a returning from to health Rakic, or if Jan Blachowicz is still up in the air.
Rakic is a good call, I think. I'd like to see Rakic versus Walker, right? Because they're kind of opposites.
All right, Matt. So as we always do with Fight Night Picks Kicks, we stack the deck one more time. There's a lot of people tuning in right now, so I just want to let you know that this is the video that's coming up next week, but we're going to do it live. Screw it, we're doing live. So we have Dern versus Hill. That one's going to be Monday night, a short live show for this card, because it is what it is. So Matt, as we do with Kicks, and we go all the way up and down through, we're split on this one. I'm going with the debuting Tainara Lisboa, and it's kind of weird that she's now favored in this matchup.
I'll be wrong about Jessica Rose Clark again.
Yeah, Lisboa does not have that level of success against pro fighters. Bryan Battle's taking on Gabe Green. I'm going with Gabe Green.
Don't love Bryan Battle at 170 for obvious reasons. That's why I have Gabe Green.
All right, then we have Yeon Kim taking on Mandy Bohm. I'm going with Kim in the matchup. Kim.
I'll take Kim in the fight, but if I'm wrong about a fighter who's on a 4-fight losing streak, I'm not going to feel terrible about it.
Stamann versus my guy, D. Silva. I'm staying with D. Silva.
This should be a really fun fight. Again, it's a prove-it-to-me fight for Cody Stamann, and like, Douglas Silva de Andrade isn't really the guy you want to have to prove it against, because he's tougher than a $2 steak, but I do have Cody Stamann.
Malone Hart, thank you for that super chat. MVP of today's show. Karl Williams taking on Chase Sherman. I'm going to go with Williams here.
I've also got Williams. Chase Sherman might be 4'11" in the UFC.
Yeah, it's rough. Matt Brown taking on Court McGee, going with Matt Brown in this one.
I got Court McGee. I want to pick Matt Brown.
Vice versa. I'm the one that's normally taking Court McGee in these fights, so it's weird. No, I'm not switching it.
It is what it is.
All right. Tim Means taking on Alex Morono, going with Morono in the fight.
Also got Morono, but I think this fight, it's wild how I just admitted I want to pick Matt Brown and we're split on the previous one. I think this fight to me is a little bit closer though, just because I do think Tim Means is going to be a little bit more there in the last few rounds because his volume can match that of Morono. So I do have Morono, but I think this will be a very competitive fight.
Alberg taking on Pizzeria, going with Carlos Alberg in the fight.
Alberg, but I think it might take a few minutes to start kind of warming up, and then I'll really start to put on the pressure with this combination, because that's the thing with Alberg. I think the Kennedy fight was a real eye-opener for him, because, hey, if I burn that hot in the first round, I don't get the finish, there isn't going to be that much left of me afterwards, so I do think that was a loss that was kind of necessary for him to reach the next level.
Expecting to go out there and just do what I do, man. Feel him out. Obviously, I want to get the knockout in that first round, but if it comes, it comes. I don't want to rush it just like I did in that first fight I had in my debut, so, at least I've got these and whatever I wrote down. But realistically, Carlos Alberg, that was in an interview that he had done.
A setback for a bounce back.
With, Combat TV last week. And I mean, Alberg realizes he can't get back to that. So for me, going with Alberg in the matchup. The next one we have Rodriguez versus Gary. I don't like hype trains, but I'll go with Ian Machado Gary with his skills.
Gary is a really skilled fighter. Now, does a lot of his skills, are they in the offensive category and more so than the defensive one? Yes, they are. But he is a very exciting young prospect to make his way up through the division. This is a fun matchup just stylistically because D-Rod should be able to clip him with a couple big shots. And we've seen when Gary gets hit by big shots, he can go down, he can get wobbled. So D-Rod should make this a competitive fight, but I do have Ian Gary. The real question mark does come into what does Gary do after, right? Because D-Rod is a great kind of first opponent opponent to really prove that you're kind of a player in the welterweight division. But after that, you've got guys like Michael Chiesa out there. You've got Neil Magny himself. Like, there's a lot of guys who've been in the top 15 for a long time, and I think they'd all be great tests for a guy like Ian Gary.
And most likely with that fight falling out for Michael Chiesa, he's kind of waiting. Does he want it again? Maybe take that one.
Sean Brady, like, there's so many good fighters at 170.
Anthony Smith taking on Johnny Walker, going with Johnny Walker.
I could see this fight going any which way, but I do have Johnny Walker.
All right, Matt. And in the main event of the afternoon, we have Jairzinho Rozenstruik taking on Jailton Almeida. I will go with the power pressure grappler being Jailton Almeida, but it is a very, very fun fight at 265.
It should be. I have Almeida. I think I'll end up getting it down at some point, and from that point, that's the difference between these two guys. Yes, Rozenstruik might be able to defend a lot of the takedowns, but if that takedown defense breaks and Jailton Almeida gets on top of him, this is going to be terrible to watch if you're a Jairzinho Rozenstruik fan. Almeida really is that next level grappler on the mat, and he's not like a Jake Shields, a Sarah McMahon, somebody who's just going to lay on top and not really go for a lot of offensive techniques like you said. He's going to wrap the legs. He's going to make you feel helpless, open you up with that ground and pound and go for the submission. So I have Almeida for all those reasons.
So again, we're going to have a live show on Monday evening. It's going to be Dern versus Hill. Make sure you tune in for that one. We will do our best to go quick through the comments, but it's going to be a really, really quick show. So a little bit different from Fight Night Picks. We've never done a show quite like this. So look forward to that one coming Monday night. It's going to be live. If you're not subscribed, subscribe so you know when we go live for that show. If you could toss a like, it is much appreciated. To everybody that hit up the super chat, we thank you. Malone Hart, the MVP of the show.
Thank you, guys.
With the big super chat, and looking forward to these fights here on a Saturday afternoon coming at you from Charlotte.
I think I have a big pay-per-view after that Dern Hill card, don't we?
Nope, it's another Apex card.
I thought it was an off week and then a big pay-per-view.
No,
I guess I'm wrong on that.
It's an off week and another Apex card. So look forward to those fights. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. As we always say, let's get into it.